So Pokemon is a pretty cool game. Its strongest aspect in my opinion, even if people don't realize it, is its ability to create a unique emergent narrative journey for each player. Basically, everyone gets their own team that is different from everyone else's. You and your friend may both have a Charmander, but they're not the same creature. Based on both your choices and natural aspects of the Pokemon, they'll be slightly different and will go on different journeys. This makes Pokemon a very personal game. You become very attached to these creatures and the journey you go on with them, as compared to other JRPGs where you're kind of just having a parasocial relationship with this set party of characters. They might have a better written story, but it's not your story, it's theirs. Additionally, a lot of the mechanics in the game are well chosen to support this. Evolution gives these very impactful moments of growth where you see a visible change in your team. Having 4 moves might limit your options, but it also means that what moves you do choose will have a significant impact on how your Pokemon plays, and again goes into that aspect of making different Pokemon of the same species play differently. That's also supported by TMs and move tutors, which give you more options into that. It's all around a pretty good system. There are also many different ways of obtaining Pokemon, from just going around and catching, to being gifted them, to gambling for them, and all those create a slightly different story of how you came across this creature. Gym leaders both make a nice set challenge to build up to, but also their monotyping means that different Pokemon in your team will have different points to shine against gym leaders that they're super effective against. It's a pretty cool series. However, there's a reason I'm using the term cool and not good. And that's because I think it has some very significant flaws that you have to ignore in order to truly enjoy the games. The one that's been hampering my enjoyment recently is So what is grinding? In a gaming sense, it's referring to repeatedly going through a basic task in order to receive some sort of benefit. Or, in a logical sense, you could consider that trading time for some sort of gain. Specifically in this case, I'm referring to when you battle Pokemon against weaker Pokemon for experience to gain levels to increase stats. Before we go into why that's bad, I think it's important to lay out why it's in the game and what are some of the positives of it. It's in the game just as a natural consequence of the systems that are designed. If you have these set challenges that you need to beat in order to progress in the game, like a rival battle or a gym battle, you need to have some way for the player to be able to train up their Pokemon in order to face that challenge in the case that they're underleveled. If you don't, a player can easily get stuck and be unable to continue on in the game. Additionally, it sort of creates this gradient of skill, where more experienced players don't have to grind as much because they can beat enemies with lower level teams, but less experienced players will have to grind more to make the challenges easier. Additionally, in the context of emergent narrative, the idea of going out, training, and coming back stronger to face a challenge is something that can be kinda cool, a nice part of a story. It can be satisfying to return to a challenge that was once difficult and be able to overcome it. So what are the cons of grinding? Well, to start, it's boring as hell. By its nature, it's this tedious thing that doesn't really take any mental or physical effort, it's just time. Trading in time for an in-game benefit is not something that's particularly interesting in any way. But the problem extends beyond it just being boring. It kind of has the potential to remove strategy from the game. Okay, so in a Pokemon game, let's say you lose a fight to a gym leader or a rival or something. How do you know that the reason why is because you're underleveled? Like, if you're significantly underleveled, yes, that can be obvious, but if it's somewhat close, how do you know that it's because your Pokemon were too low level? How do you know that you couldn't have beat it if you had just changed your strategy, if you had done something a little bit differently? You might just preemptively go off and grind your Pokemon up, when instead you could have come at it with a new angle. And isn't that just so much more interesting and satisfying than just your Pokemon having higher numbers than they did before? You coming up with a new strategy and being able to use your Pokemon in new, interesting ways in order to face a challenge. It encourages the idea that when you hit an obstacle, just go grind for a bit. Don't come up with any new strategies, don't use your brain. Might makes right. The power of your Pokemon is all that matters. And if we're going to be using a time-consuming strategy, you're going to want to minimize the amount of time you spend on it. So don't ever experiment with your team, just leave all the Pokemon you catch in the box, you don't need them. Choose 6 Pokemon, use them throughout the whole game, never switch anything up. We can go further though, don't actually use 6 Pokemon, use 3 or 2 or 1. Focus all that XP onto a handful of Pokemon and they'll be higher level and will have an easier time with the game. 6 is just a waste, you're spreading your XP way too thin. People know that's not the fun way to play the game, though. It's fun to build a team, it's fun to train them all up and face challenges and go through obstacles, and I just want the games to actually encourage that sort of play. I don't want to have to force myself to play in an unoptimal way in order to enjoy the game. The game is encouraging me, it wants me to play the game in a way that makes it not a good game, and that's why I don't think a Pokemon game with grinding is a very good one. So how do we fix the problem? It's not experience candies. They are a terrible idea. They make the problem worse. If you remove the time constraint from grinding and just let me automatically level up a Pokemon really quickly, oh, now there's no barrier to doing it. The thing is, grinding is actually a symptom of the actual problem. That problem being levels. With levels, Pokemon can be stronger or weaker than each other simply due to an arbitrary value. If you go into a gym battle and the Pokemon are 10 levels higher than you, you know that you're at a disadvantage, not because you have a bad strategy or because your Pokemon are particularly bad, but because the game designers just set the number really high, and now you have to go and grind. Is that really a satisfying challenge to get over, that they're just better than you? And yeah, eventually your Pokemon will get higher level than theirs, but is that fun either? Just stomping them with a higher level team? Neither being under or over leveled is fun. On one hand it becomes an impossible challenge, on the other it completely removes the challenge. If we were to remove levels, you wouldn't be able to be stomped, or stomp the enemy team, arbitrarily. And losses would become solely about strategy, about the Pokemon you brought in, the moves you have on them, the decisions you made, and not because you're just too weak because a number said so. It would encourage you to see your Pokemon not just as numbers to be improved, but creatures with their own statistics and their own abilities and options, and you would switch them out to fit different situations and use them differently and have different strategies deployed with each one. Isn't that just so much more fun than just grinding them up until they have the right numbers in order to now two-shot this enemy Pokemon instead of three-shot? There is some added baggage to go along with levels though, like evolution and learning new moves and gaining EV stats. Those are actually good things. We don't want to lose those. So we don't actually remove levels, but instead just remove level from the equation for stats. And this actually gets by some of the other problems that would come about from removing levels. Levels create a nice sense of growth throughout the game, as you see your Pokemon grow over time as they train and become stronger. But having moves and evolution and EV still in the game allows us to keep that, to a smaller degree, but to actually a more interesting one. These are more impactful changes than just your Pokemon's numbers go up. And because levels are still kind of in the game, we still actually have grinding, but it's far improved from what it once was. If you have trouble with a challenge and want to go grind, you're now going for something far more interesting than just stats. While evolution does give kind of a chunk of stats that would make it easier to defeat a challenge, it's also limited. You can only do it maybe once or twice a game per Pokemon. In addition, it can also open up some new options. Getting a new ability or a new type can create new strategies for your team. You might learn a move that's just an upgrade to one you already have, but you also might learn a new option like a boosting move or a healing move that would give you a new strategy to employ in the game, and that might be what you're going for. And EVs, well yes, they're just stats, they're directed stats. You're choosing what specific way you want to improve your Pokemon in order to defeat a challenge. All these are far more interesting than just mindless stats over and over. And while yes, it's still grinding, it's now far more optional. It's not something you have to do, since your Pokemon aren't going to be losing simply because they are low level. This to me improves the pros of grinding. In terms of that training arc thing, now when your Pokemon does grind and train up, you actually see something every time. It either evolves or learns a new technique. When limited to that, it's far more interesting than just gaining abstract numbers. And in terms of allowing inexperienced players to beat challenges, evolutions will wean the player into the difficulty. Early on, they'll be able to grind up to evolutions in order to surpass challenges, but over time, they'll have to more and more strategize and use different techniques in order to get past them. Overall, I think these sort of changes would encourage a style of play that is far more fun. It also just meshes better with the ideas of Pokemon. Like in the story, they always say, oh, it's not just powerful Pokemon, but it's about understanding and caring about your Pokemon. Yet level matters so much. It really is an odd contradiction, a ludonarrative dissonance, if you will. From a casual perspective, you spend less time on grinding and more time on the actual fun stuff. And from a challenge or Nuzlocke perspective, you get less gray area, a more consistent challenge that doesn't have that whole weird thing of, what level do I level my Pokemon up to in order to have the appropriate level of challenge? So in the end, I just think it would be a better experience. But don't take my word for it. Here's a Firered Romhack with these change implemented. These change. In it, I've removed level from the calculation of stats and damage because it's also in there, and replaced it with the constant of 50. I've also messed with the healing of potions, super potion, and hyper potions just to make that nice and balanced because 20 health is not a lot anymore. And also set Nightshade and Seismic Toss's damage to exactly 50. Sorry, Seismic Toss and Nightshade, you're no longer different from Dragon Rage and Sonic Boom. I've had a lot of fun running it, both casually and as a Nuzlocke. I think it works very well. So if you're interested, try it out and tell me what you think. As a side note, there are some other notable consequences of removing levels that I've noticed while playing the games. Firstly, running from Pokemon is much more difficult. Since it relies on speed, you can't just out-level them and easily escape because of that. You usually have to run 2 or 3 times before escaping, and that can be annoying. But I actually think it's kind of interesting, because the thing is, there are a lot of ways around that problem. You could have a runaway Pokemon or a stench Pokemon, you could have a very fast Pokemon as your lead, or you could get the Smoke Orb. And because there's so many different options, it becomes an actually interesting problem, and a part of your team is how you're going to solve this problem of getting away from Pokemon consistently. I think it's really interesting. Also, you know how Kanto you can kind of do a few things out of order, but it never served a purpose because going back to an area once you're over leveled is stupid? Well, hey, guess what? A non-linear Pokemon game! It's not perfect, but it's kind of neat. The one outright negative to this change is that EV grind is now a pain in the ass, since you can't always find a Pokemon that you outspeed, one-shot, and has the right EVs. So that's kind of annoying. But it's something that's solvable. If you increase EV yield in certain scenarios or buff the Macho Brace, those can work around it. The point is, there are solutions. Anyways, thank you for watching.